I'm really delighted to be here to tell you all about Cochrane Classmate. I'm going to structure this webinar in this way. So first of all, I'm actually going to start with an introduction to Cochrane Crowd, because as Dario just alluded to, it's very much connected to Classmate, and you can't use Classmate without some understanding of Cochrane Crowd. I'm also going to talk about Classmate and why we developed it and how it works. And then at that point, I'll stop and we can have some questions if there are any. And then I'm going to go into a live demonstration of Classmate and show you what you can actually do in the platform before coming back to the presentation just to describe some of the new features we've just rolled out and what we've got in the pipeline. So first of all then, Cochrane Crowd, well, what is it? Well, Cochrane Crowd is what we call our crowdsourcing platform that we launched now almost 10 years ago. And essentially, it's a platform that hosts tasks for people to take part in. And anyone can join Cochrane Crowd as long as they've got an internet connection and they have an interest in health. And we set up Cochrane Crowd because for years now we have been struggling to keep pace with the amount of research produced. We are drowning under the deluge of publications. We have global scientific output doubling every 9 years. And so Crowd was developed as a potential new way to help us keep up with the deluge of data. So I've used this phrase crowdsourcing. I'll just spend a moment or two defining that. It is a word much used. It was first coined by Jeff Howe in 2006, although the actual act of crowdsourcing has been around in certain forms for centuries. And he defined it as the act of an institution taking a function and outsourcing it to an undefined, generally large network of people in the form of an open call. And there are various different types of crowdsourcing out there. And the type of crowdsourcing that an organization might use will depend very much on the nature of the problem the organization is trying to solve. And so the type of crowdsourcing that we use in Cochrane Crowd is called microtasking. And it's essentially the breaking down of a large corpus of data into smaller units and distributing those units to a large online crowd. Or somebody more poetic than I am described it, the distribution of small parts of the problem. And so what you can see on the screen here now is an example of one of our micro tasks. It's called RCT identification, and it's about helping to identify reports of a study called a randomized controlled trial, study type. And this was our first task that we launched on Cochrane Crowd. And what you can see on the screen is over here on the left-hand side is a title and an abstract. And there are some highlighted words and words on the screen. And then over on the right-hand side, you have this decision panel. And the crowd contributor has to come and have a look at the record and make a decision as to whether or not they think it is describing a randomized trial or not. And once they've made a decision, they reject in this case, the next record immediately comes up ready for them to make a decision. And just to briefly explain the highlighted words, these are to help direct the contributor's vision to parts of the abstract that might help them to answer the question. So we have blue highlights that we call our sort of directional highlights. So these just help to sort of split out this bulk of text a bit. And we have our red highlights, which we call warning highlights. So they generally appear on records that are not what we're looking for. We also have yellow highlights. We don't have any yellow highlights on this record, but the yellow highlights are the sort of helpful highlights that would be most likely to appear on records that are describing an RCT. And to date, the crowd have screened hundreds of thousands of records for us. So each of the tasks on Cochrane Crowd is supported by brief interactive training. And the training is made up of a series of practice records, usually with commentary, so you can have a go, see if you're on the right lines, and you get some commentary telling you why you were right or where you might have gone wrong. And the idea of the interactive training is to help ensure the accuracy of individuals taking part in those tasks. But then we also have what we call agreement algorithms sitting behind each of the tasks on Cochrane Crowd. And what that means is that no record is looked at once. Most records need 4 agreements for it to be either deemed what we're looking for or what we're not looking for. So in the case of an RCT task, 4 agreeing classifications from 4 people working independently, all saying they think it is describing an RCT. And so this algorithm approach helps us to ensure what we call collective accuracy. But as well as tasks on Cochrane Crowd, we also developed some standalone learning, and we call this micro learning. And essentially, it's bite-sized learning modules on topics relevant to evidence-based medicine. So here's just a screenshot from one of the modules that we have available. This one is from the study designs set of modules, bite-sized modules. So as you can see, they're sort of highly visual, and they're all made up of a series of instructional screens telling you a bit about whatever concept it is they're trying to describe, and then a short quiz at the end made up of 5 questions. And so far on Cochrane Crowd, as I say, we launched about 10 years ago. We've hosted hundreds of tasks. We've had over 30,000 people join the collective effort, and together amassed a whopping 9 million classifications. We're often asked, well, who are the crowd who join? Well, our current contributors are based in 179 countries. We know that around 46% are educated to postgraduate level, so a pretty educated crowd. We have around a fifth who don't have a degree. Around a quarter who sign up are completely new to health research, and around a third have had no or little experience with systematic reviewing, or not even too sure what a systematic review is. But then we've also had about a fifth involved actually in the production of a systematic review. And we've got a large proportion, 41% students in a health-related area. And our most popular age bracket currently on Cochrane Crowd is 30, with 32% aged between 17 and 24 years. And so it has proved a really popular platform. And I think that's partly because of 3 main things, perhaps. It is a way to directly contribute to evidence-based healthcare. Those tasks that are hosted on Cochrane Crowd are needed tasks. They're not set up with already known answers. They are tasks that we need doing. It is a way, I think, of gaining new skills and this sort of learning by doing approach. And there are various ways in which you can be rewarded for your time given on Cochrane Crowd. You can earn Cochrane membership. You can get named acknowledgement in reviews. There are plenty of certificates and badges to collect along the way as well. And indeed, in various surveys we've done over the years, 2 key motivations stand out from contributors in answer to those surveys and around why people take part in Cochrane Crowd, and it is really to learn and to help. And so this kind of brings me now on to the classmate part. So a question we were often asked in the early days of Cochrane Crowd, and we still asked, is can I use Cochrane Crowd for my students? And we would always say yes, but in those early days, our experience was that it was quite difficult to manage a group of people in a group way. So this isn't just about saying, yes, of course, let your students go to Cochrane Crowd, just give them the URL and off they go. We wanted to actually help teachers, trainers, educators manage that group as a group, and that was quite tricky. It was also quite difficult to monitor quality. And we, of course, in the early days had a very limited number of tasks available. And it was potentially not as fun as it could be. And so that's why we built Cochrane Classmate. And so I would describe Classmate as an extension of Cochrane Crowd that enables trainers, and by that I kind of mean anyone actually who wants to manage a group doing Cochrane Crowd activities, to use the micro tasks and the micro learning in their own teaching environments. And so how does it work? Well, there are three main things available in Classmate, and I've described them a little, two of them already, which are micro tasks, micro learning, and pathways. So within Classmate, you can choose to set your students a particular micro task to do, or you can choose for them to undertake a particular piece of micro learning, or you can do something which we call a pathway. You can assign your students to join one of our pathways, or indeed create your own pathway. And I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. And so in terms of the micro tasks available, we have certainly more than one now. We use what we call our mainstream tasks for Classmate. So in Cochrane Crowd, we have a class of tasks called our mainstream micro tasks. And these are long-term tasks that aren't going anywhere. We need these tasks around for a long time. And they are around helping to identify different types of studies and helping to describe those studies. And as I've said, we've also developed some standalone micro learning. And we have several different modules available. We have one called Key Concepts in Health Research. We have one on study designs, introducing study designs for complete beginners. We have one on Consort, and we have a new set on introducing health equity. And then, of course, pathways. So as I said, you can set your students to do a single task or a single bit of micro learning, but with a pathway, you can set them to do a whole series of tasks or activities, which we've put together. And we have two pre-planned set up pathways, one called the newcomer pathway and one called the student pathway. And under the newcomer pathway, this is aimed at people who are completely new to health research. So it's a combination of learning and doing some tasks, as is the student pathway. The student pathway is more aimed at those who are doing a health-related course at the moment. So it could be a medical student, for example. But you can also now create your own pathway as well. And I'll talk more about that when we do the demo part of the webinar. So it's really easy to use Classmate. I honestly want to emphasize that, but you'll see just how easy it is in a moment. But essentially, there are 4 key steps. Go to Classmate, choose what it is you want your students to do, set some parameters around that regarding timings, and invite your students. And it really is as simple as that. And you can then sit back and relax with a cup of tea.